but I wanted to try to put some of you at ease because I hear some stress and some concerns. I've had relatives that don't understand real estate. They had stresses and concerns when things of a different nature came up, and I had to come in and console them. So everybody in this room, look at this as a positive. It may be a negative for some, but people who couldn't sell a house, and now's the time to buy it. I've bought houses on the east side of Cleveland and $500 through bank foreclosures. There are some tremendous deals out there if you can get good realtors to help you. And I think they're going to pay you market value, and I don't think anyone else is going to pay some of you market value for some of these homes. Some of them are run down. So look at this as an overall benefit. I think this is going to be a beautiful project. NFL is loaded, but the NFL is also a business. Well, trust me, this is the NFL. These gentlemen don't work specifically for the NFL, but the NFL is running this ship and guiding this ship. But I think this is going to be a tremendous community asset for all of you. But I said before, unionize, get a powerful voice, because another thing that gray area needs a buffer. That gray area needs a major buffer. And I think that's the first thing you guys get as a collective voice. Get some kind of buffer so you don't have those parking issues that you're so worried about. That's one of your things that you guys have to have a common voice. But work closely with these gentlemen. I'm impressed by both of these gentlemen. I think they'd be easy to work with, and I think for most of you, this is going to be a blessing.
Well, you say you guys. You're not the community?
Right, this isn't Cleveland, and you're not losing your home.
No.
Technique that's used to gain consensus, basically to give the illusion of public support for anything. And because they have to get public to buy into all this stuff, you know, they have to pretend that everybody wants it. You're the only one that doesn't want this. You're the one that's crazy.
You're weird.
Right. So when they have meetings, you know, and they have a lot of them, public workshops, visioning, whatever, on any number of topics, they've already got the conclusion. They already know what they want. You know, they want stack and back housing, mass transit. They just want you to think that's what you want. And so they get a bunch of people, and they usually have shills in the rooms with you, facilitators. They have, you know, of course, activists that are there. They have the developers that are there. They have all the people that are going to, you know, of course, benefit by all of this.
Sure.
And they are all there, and they're all voting. So, you know, it's stacked against you. If you speak out, you are ridiculed, you are marginalized, you are, you know, again, in real life, we're being Delphi'd every day in California. It's called political correctness, and it's called shut them up. It's all about shutting you down. It's all about calling you a racist. It's all about calling you whatever, you know. Intolerant. You're intolerant because you don't want your 5-year-old to learn about, you know, someone's lifestyle, which, you know, I don't care what people do. I just don't want my 5-year-old to have to deal with that at 5. You know what I mean?
Right.
They should be learning to read and write. You know, I can help fill in the blanks and stuff like that later on. But it's all part of that bigger agenda. And the way they try to shut us down. And they've done a very good job of that in California for a long time. I mean, conservatives wouldn't even, I'm conservative, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it got to the point where you couldn't talk about politics. They don't want us talking about politics. They don't want us talking about anything that actually means something.
Right.
Because then we might figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the reasons they've been able to steamroll us is by using this technique. And so, you know, but it's gotten to the point where I'm not going to be silent anymore, you know.
Good.
Again, rip the Band-Aid off. Start talking about it. If somebody doesn't want to talk about it, too bad. You know what? They don't have to talk about it. They don't want to listen to it, too bad. To reverse the Delphi technique is what I do, okay? What are you, racist? And then laugh. You know, because it really is a stupid thing, you know. How many times can you play the racist card? It doesn't mean it's just so ridiculous now. Do not buy into it. Do not feel bad. You know, I don't care if you're Catholic and raised on guilt. That's how I was. Get over it.
Sure.
You know, we are trying to save our country here for our kids.
Right.
And we need to speak up and speak out and do it often.
So if you're considered rude, too bad.
Well, you know what? Yeah, but, you know, be assertive. It's called being assertive.
Yeah.
See, they want to tell you it's rude because
Right.
you're not saying what
Right.
they want to hear. So when you speak up, and, you know, I went to one of their meetings and said, excuse me, you know, can you define open space? Because they said, well, you know, one of their questions was that in the Delphi technique, they wanted us to rank, you know, what our values were, how we felt about conserving open space. Is that important to us or not important to us? And I said, excuse me, what do you mean by open space? Is that government space? What is that? You know, oh, well, it's whatever you want it to be. It's any space that is not developed, currently developed. And I said, well, that open space is somebody's private property. You know, it's not just open space. I mean, if you're talking about somebody's government property, then that's fine. Do whatever you want with it. Conserve it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm all for that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But when you're talking about telling someone they can't build on their private property because we don't think they should, because it should be open to everybody, we don't have a right to do that. And so they tried to shut me down. And they tried to, one person told me I was a racist. And so, but the point is that, you know what, it's like, listen, you know what, one of the things that distinguishes America from other countries is the fact that we do own private property.
That's right.
That we can accumulate wealth.
Yeah.
That we can, you know, that was one of the things that we could do. Other countries, they don't buy property. They have to rent it. They lease it from the government.
Right.
It's not their property. So, you know, for us to just say, yeah, we don't want that guy to build on his ridge line, you know, that he owns. That's wrong. We should not be saying that. So you need to really think about that. But you need to speak out. You need to speak out for your neighbors. You need to protect your neighbor's private property as if it were your own.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, when they come for your property, nobody's going to protect
That's
you.
right. That's right. Now is our window of opportunity.
Which is why I went to the supervisors meeting and spoke out for the people of El Sobrante who
Right.
didn't know what was happening to them. They don't know.
Yeah.
And, you know, so for those of us that are awake, we need to double our efforts. You know, we need to double our efforts. We need to speak out, and we need to speak out often. And the thing, they fear that. Oh my gosh, you know, they haven't been challenged, especially in California, for so long, that it's amazing how good it feels to stand up for yourself. And it's not being rude. It is not being rude. What they are doing is rude. What they are doing
That's
is
right.
wrong.
Suppressing truth.
And that is exactly what we need to do. We need to say, you know what, I am right, and I'm going to speak out about it, and what they are doing is wrong. And when you start pointing it out, pointing the finger back at them, they start running. And
That's great.
Yeah.
Great.
And they don't, they're not as tough as they think. When you start actually standing up and using your voice, and it doesn't have to be screaming, it doesn't have to be that, it just has to be assertive, then they actually back down.
That's typical of a bully.
It totally is.
They're all blustery and mean, and
That's right.
and
And when you get in their face and you actually call them on it,
yeah,
they back down.
yeah.
And that's what we
good.
have here, is we have someone who's been allowed to bully us as a community,
Yeah.
as a Californians, who's been able to bully us because we wanted to go along to get along. And we didn't want to make waves. Well, too late and too bad, because you know what? This is what we got. And we're guilty of that. But we have a voice now, and we need to use it. And, you know, however that is for you, if that's writing a letter, if that's whatever it is, editorials, you know, get your thoughts down on paper. If you don't want to speak about it, get your thoughts down on paper, send it into your local magazine. You'd be surprised at how many people read this stuff online, you know, and don't know about it. They don't know what's really happening. They know something's wrong. They feel the same way. They just don't have a name for it. You know, there's people that own property, and that liberals, Democrats, whatever. You know, there's people that are losing their property and they don't know why.
Mm.
And so it's an issue we could all get behind.
it now, but he was talking about the Delphi technique.
Uh-huh.
And I looked online and read a little bit about that. And I remember them doing similar techniques in school where it's group thinking, and they try to break you down where if you have an idea different than the group, then they try to use that as against you, as that you have the wrong idea. I was just wondering if you could talk about that.
Yes, the Delphi technique has been used for many, many years. It came out of the same institutions as the human potential movement, they called it. And the whole idea was they understood that a dynamic type leader could pretty well hypnotize an audience, especially if the people were already true believers. That's why they come to learn powers, etc., the inner powers and all the rest of it. But they also thought we could use this for persuasion purposes on councils, for instance, at council meetings where the public are invited in to listen in. And for the big changes that they wanted to do with the world, even right down to taking their water supplies from them, they would send in these particular characters that were taught in the Delphi technique, and they would set the stage, so to speak, so that the public who would come in, who would eventually have to give their consent for any of this to proceed, any projects to do with taking over your water supply, etc., they put plants in the audience. And what they do is they quickly are able to suss out those in the audience as well, who are the people pleasers, the ones who would bring the apples to the teachers if they were still back in school. And they would make eye contact with those ones. Therefore, if anybody stood up at the conference and asked a serious question that the man didn't want to be asked, or it was too hot on the topic, too truthful as to how the public would suffer if a particular bill or whatever was passed, you would get the people pleaser, to stand up and shout down at that particular talker. So it's a psychological process that's taught, and the whole idea, again, is to bring everyone to consensus by using simple Plato-type dialogue techniques, where they'll lead you into a form of logic. They'll say, we all agree that gravity keeps you on the ground, and you'll say, yeah. If you jump off the ground, you'll come back down. Yeah, and step by step, they'll take you along their topic if they want to take the water supply from you. And at first, it will be logical. No one wants a poisoned water supply. That's correct. They'd all agree. And little by little, he'll take you in 180 degrees. And when the few in the audience who are not under the hypnotic spell of consensus, because people in groups all tend to want to agree with each other. There's always the few who retain their individuality and can still think. When one person stands up and points out the obvious, the fact that they're going to be robbed of their rights, and they'll pay a fortune for this new installation to be brought in or whatever, the people pleasers then stand up together and shout down that, they'll say, quiet, you're disturbing the talk, you're disturbing and that's how it works. It's pure psychology, an old psychological technique. And these professionals are sent across the country. They're flown in to get their way. It's generally for continental-wide movements. For instance, they did that with the watershed bills that they wanted passed, where they could say that everywhere in the planet was a potential watershed, and that's to take all your rights of land away from you. But it was never presented to the public in such a straightforward fashion. They used the Delphi technique to make it happen. And ultimately, the people will give their own consent to their own demise. They will lose everything through consensus building.
And it's extremely effective on most
Very
individuals.
effective. Yeah. Very more so today, because for the last 15 years, sometimes 20 years in different states and different places, they've been using it in school through groupthink, where they all sit in circles, and before anyone can leave the group or the circle, they must come to a consensus on everything. If one particular individual has a different opinion from the group or the mob, he's ostracized, and he's sent to Coventry, so to speak, until he realizes the errors of his ways and comes back and agrees with the rest of them. So they've already been conditioned to consensus.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Mr. Watt.
Thanks for calling. Yeah, we're run by psychology and psychiatry and science. And we are well understood because we're the most studied species on the planet. Now we've got Jim from Buffalo, New York on the phone. You there, Jim?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
How are you?
Not so bad. Go ahead.
I've just been listening to your show. Great as always. You mentioned before, although you said it in a different context, about people nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
I'm convinced that it seems to me that nobody cares about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And when this kind of news, like you were telling, when you try to put forth this info to people look at you like you have three heads.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess if they didn't hear it on CNN or Fox News, it's not true.
Yes.
And this goes, I guess it kind of blends right into what you were just saying about this Delphi technique. If people are being indoctrinated to think that way, then they're not going to think outside the box ever.
Yes.
It's a sad state of affairs.
It is. However, you go back into the books again and you'll find that many of the big players who understood and set up the think tanks that would eventually implement a lot of this agenda, like Lord Bertrand Russell, they stated in their own books that they would create a situation, a mental state of apathy amongst the general population, and they went into it in some detail as to how they'd bring this about. And the whole idea was through constant repetition of daily news with little blurbs coming from government agencies that people would psychologically begin to accept they were inferior, their lives were being controlled, they'd accept it, and that they didn't have rights, etc. All the thinking was done by their betters above them, these special people, and that's happened. You have a state of apathy where people feel that everything is out of their control anymore, and plus, with the wars on the family, which were very real wars, they were scientifically brought in to play and promulgated through magazines and talk shows and so on until you have a dysfunctional system. People are in an apathetic state, and when they're all divided and conquered, it's much easier to steamroll ahead with this scientific type dictatorship that they plan to ultimately admit is being used on the public.
Right, and the mainstream media and advertising agencies do this to us every minute of every day.
Yes. Again, Bertrand Russell in the 1920s and again in the 50s reiterated that very point. He says we must bring the experts in psychological manipulation, he says Madison Avenue and the others, in to work with us because they understand how to motivate the public and make them do things they would otherwise not do.
Yep, and this is why we have a nation of sheep.
Yes.